Well, if all things are working right and in good order, I'm going to ask everybody to give a round of applause to DPD Police Chief Ron Thomas. The community is here, Chief, and we did some opening kind of conversation about what to expect. Yes. This is more of about having community questions asked, direct dialogue with you. It's your town hall, and we do have some questions that were also submitted via the RSVP dynamic. But with that being said, I'd like for you to just open up, say hello, opening comments, and then we're going to get right to community conversation.
Well, hello. I won't talk too long just because I want to get to the questions and certainly understand what most of the questions will be about, and happy to provide some clarity there. But I first just want to say that happy to be here. As many of you know, I love to be in community. This is actually my third of probably 5 community events that I will attend today. Just really appreciate being able to engage in the community, be in the community, answer questions, meet people, many old friends. And so I understand that much of this discussion today will be about education-based development. I want to say that again, it's education-based development, and you know, I know that as this concept started, that it was education-based discipline, but actually it was a suggestion from the Independent Monitor to not use the word discipline, because it didn't really feel like it was true discipline in the truest sense of the word, and so thought that it would be appropriate to change that to development, because at the end of the day, I think that is what our goal is to better develop officers who make mistakes. Excuse me.
And so with that being said, Dr. Lisa Calderon, if you would grab a seat, also our independent monitor, Liz, if you also would grab a seat. The first part of this conversation is going to definitely be about the education-based, it's not discipline anymore.
That's correct, it's development.
Education-based development, and with that being said, I'm just going to go right over to Dr. Lisa Calderon and Liz Castle. Would you please introduce yourselves and then frame this conversation and ask the questions or pose whatever it is that we need to know or hear about via this issue and how it impacts community.
So thank you, Brother Jeff. Thank you, Police Chief Thomas, for being here and talking to community. It's something that we requested, and so I'm glad that you agreed to come here, which you always have, so I appreciate that. I'm Dr. Lisa Calderon, and I am a community organizer. I'm Executive Director of Women Uprising as well, and I have been a long-time police accountability organizer. And I think what's really important in this conversation today is that we have a clear understanding of this policy that Police Chief Thomas is proposing in a way that is really unprecedented in the way that we collaborate around police discipline. From a community standpoint, we're very concerned about rolling back the independent oversight for an office that we have basically fought for as a result of the murder of Paul Childs by a DPD officer. I think that was back in 2003 or so. And what's important to remember is that every time we have fought for accountability, it wasn't just given to us. We literally had to fight for it. We had to fight to be at the table. We had to fight to be heard. And as a result, we had been an integral part, and by we, I mean those in the community who are interested and work steadily on police accountability. This situation is different. We have been at the table many times through many, many years with Chief Thomas, looking at a shift in the police policy, a change of it. And when it was revealed, we had done it together. Again, we had a fight to be at the table, but we did it together. This time, the policy, as proposed, has already been written. I think we can assume that the police union has also seen it. And so we're coming in at the back end, and the independent monitor will tell us about the specific things that we are concerned about, but I am concerned that this is not okay. to leave community out of this process. It's not okay to bring us in after the fact. It's not okay to go manufacture consent by talking to people who are going to be biased toward policing as opposed to those who have maybe been harmed by police actions. So there's lots more to say, but I'll leave it there and turn it over to Monitor Liz Castle.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Elizabeth Perez Castle. I am the independent monitor for the city of Denver. Thank you for inviting me here today. And with regards to the discussion of education-based development, this is a conversation that we could sit here and talk about and debate for hours and hours and hours. The current discipline system has been in effect since 2008, and that came about based upon a community engaged program in which there were officers, there was Department of Safety, there was academia, there were community members, city council, DA's office, professors, independent studies were done of the police department, specifically how to address what is the best discipline system. It was done by, the initials are PERF, it's Police Executive Research Forum. There was an independent study of the department. There were at least two studies conducted of the department to see what the best discipline system was. This process, engaged with community, was part of an effort to make discipline more consistent and answer also to the concerns of the community. And it took approximately 3.5 years to come up with what is now the discipline system that we are discussing, which is basically called a matrix system. That type of engagement, that type of community input, that level of participation by community really put us in a position where the community could trust that discipline is being handed out fairly, and there is accountability, and as well as officers could rely on a formal system of discipline where there is no room for, whereas before there may have been supervisors making those decisions, there is no room for bias or preferential treatment. So 3.5 years, put that together, and that is a system we have had in place since 2008. The education-based development has come forward, and as of, I know that the chief wanted to get this going early in this year, but there wasn't the level of engagement with community that we felt needed to happen, and I still feel that way. I would say, what is the hurry? There is no risk to safety of the community to address and take the time for community to have that kind of input that they had originally when the matrix was created. This is a system, the system of discipline for the police department is something that will impact us for years and years to come. So we need to take our time. We need to do this right. The average community member can read a draft policy, but unless they know what the entire system is, they really can't give an informed opinion. And in my opinion, it's important for community members not only to engage with the department, but to engage with each other. We have community members from all over Denver that have different policing experiences. They live in different kinds of neighborhoods. They come from different races, different backgrounds. They identify as different genders. It's important for community to also be able to hear those experiences. So when a recommendation is being made, they are able to understand other community concerns, not just the concerns of a particular community. So that's really important. And there should not be a rush to do this. It was really only rolled out, at least for our consumption and public consumption, in January of 25. The draft has changed repeatedly. It has changed it was changed Tuesday. As of this week, it changed again. And I understand, and I give credit to the chief and his department for keeping up and following recommendations made by us and potentially community members. But it makes it difficult for those who may have read the policy early on to then catch up and have to read it again. This discipline is a very complicated, multifaceted process, and it is just too difficult to read a draft and be able to give meaningful input. The only, and I'd say in closing is the system broken? Where? How? Why is it broken? We would look for the department to share what analysis has been done to show where the problem exists. Where is the holdup? If it's an issue of timing, if it's an issue of how long it takes, where's the clog? Where's the clog in the drain? Can it be fixed? Are there alternatives other than education-based development to address any potential problems? Can more staffing help, more training, more audit, or some auditing? And what has been tried prior to jumping to education-based development? And if it is broken, how can we fix it? And that process needs to involve the community, OIM, Citizen Oversight Board, city leaders, and we need to take our time to do that.
Okay, Chief, with that being said, I'll just let you respond to what you heard and any questions that may be embedded in those comments.
Thank you. So I guess the first thing that I would say is that I recognize the time that was taken to develop the discipline matrix. This, in my mind, is not a change to the discipline matrix. The discipline matrix is a framework, and I'm not changing that framework. I'm actually changing the process of investigating and bringing to conclusion cases, lower level discipline cases. And I will not go so far as to say the system is broken, but certainly the system has challenges, and the greatest challenge, I think, is the length of time that it takes to resolve a case. And I just think that when someone files a complaint against an officer, I think that waiting 8-9 months, maybe sometimes over a year, I think is too long. I think that erodes trust because I think it leads people to believe that that they have forgotten about the complaint, and then if it takes 8-9 months to respond to someone and tell someone that a complaint is not sustained, I think that they're inclined to think that was probably a foregone conclusion that we just took our time to tell them about. And then if we tell them several months to a year later that okay, we have determined that the officer was at fault, he's been given a written reprimand, I personally think that that's a very unsatisfactory non-solution oriented response to someone who has filed a complaint. And so I think that providing training to someone in letting the complainant know that this officer has acknowledged that they were at fault, and they will be going through some significant training in order to correct that mistake and understand what both the department expectation and the community expectation is. I think that is a solution-oriented outcome. And having spent 3 tours, both as a supervisor, a command officer, and the commander of internal affairs, I can tell you that many times when people file complaints, one of the things that they say is, this is what happened to me, I'm upset about it, but I don't necessarily want the officer to get in trouble. I just want them to understand what they did wrong and how that impacted me. And certainly that's not every single case. But I think that frequently that is what we hear from complainants. And I think that by providing that, what they've actually asked for, which is for the officer to acknowledge the mistake, for the officer to be trained in both what they were supposed to do and what that community expectation is, I think that we're giving what they've asked for. As it relates to I think the challenges, again, aside from it taking too long, again, not solution oriented. I don't assess any blame for the length of time that it takes to investigate a case. We've increased staffing in our Internal Affairs Bureau, and that has caused very little dent in the challenge. I think that I have taken my time in rolling out this concept. I talked to Liz probably early in 2024 about my desire to do something different as it related to lower level discipline. And when we had those initial conversations, she was supportive. And those conversations continued throughout 2024. We would meet for quarterly trends meetings. We would meet, to discuss cases. So we probably met, 8-10 times in 2024 to discuss my desire to move towards an education-based discipline process for lower level cases. Again, not once did she say, I'm totally against that. I don't think you should do that. I'm going to fight you tooth and nail. In fact, she has regular engagements with our police union and told the union that she was supportive of the concept. And I understand that we were talking in concepts initially. She had never seen a draft policy. She'd never seen a workup of our concept, because it was something that we were working on throughout that time that we were talking about it. And so it wasn't until the end of 2024 that I provided the framework to her. And so I believe that we have been diligent about putting together something that is appropriate. We did engage community, and we continue to engage community, and I've committed to doing so.
I want to send it over to the both of you and continue this conversation. Chief, I want to just see if I understand a few things, because I don't know what education-based development is. Mm-hmm. But listening, I'm getting more clarity about what it may be. What I think I heard you say was, this is not an overhaul of what is in place that was developed over that 2.5-year period.
Correct.
It is a component that addresses a part in terms of low-level dynamics to where an officer has admitted to or taken ownership of whatever that dynamic may be, and then it leads to a solution-based outcome. That's the educational part. And so is it speeding up the system?
Yes.
What is it that I'm hearing that could be clarified? Okay. Does this overhaul what's there, or is it a portion of what already exists to address some problems within that?
So what the matrix has done is it has taken all of our disciplinary specifications and broken them into categories, so A through F. And so for an A violation, the presumptive penalty is an oral reprimand. For an F violation, it's termination. And so I'm not talking about changing any of those categories. What I'm focused on, though, is those primarily A and B, potentially some C violations. We've put an appendix next to the policy so that people can see exactly which which specifications are eligible and which are ineligible. And I'll tell you, over 50% of all of our specifications are ineligible right off the bat. And so, primarily those violations where your presumptive penalty would be an oral or a written reprimand, rather than, if you agree to receive education-based development, rather than getting that oral reprimand or that written reprimand, you would be sent to training. And I want to clarify that being sent to training doesn't mean you get to sit in front of a computer and watch videos. These are going to be structured classes at the academy, presented by professors, or not professors, but instructors. And so, and you would have to do that in order to satisfy that. All of that would be documented. So as a written reprimand or an oral reprimand would be documented, so too would the fact that you received education-based development and completed education-based development, that would be documented as well. Let's say you decide, you know what, I don't think I'm going to do that, and you don't complete the classes as prescribed. Well, that case is going to go back through the rest of the process, so that you do wind up with some level of discipline. And so, I want it to be clear that we're not talking about officers that are engaged in force incidents, bias incidents. There's a very small subset of our discipline that I'm talking about, and I think that these are it doesn't make sense to take 9 months to come to the resolution that someone didn't follow a policy, like didn't understand that they were to take a report in this particular situation.
And okay, I'll send it right over, because you mentioned Liz, and based on your conversation, is that because the agreement that the community or the independent monitor would have say in anything that dealt with the discipline? And so with that being said, there's an involvement with the independent monitor to honor the spirit of what was put in place following the death of Paul Childs. So basically, with your conversations with Liz and the independent monitor representing the community's interests, is that the conversations that you all have been having that kind of represents the spirit of moving forward if there were to be any changes with the disciplinary matrix?
Yes. So, I've had conversations, like I said, with the monitor about my thoughts. As those thoughts sort of developed, and we created a framework based upon systems that are in place in other police agencies across the country. That was ultimately presented to her. Also, as I was developing that, I was meeting with a number of community groups, getting feedback, meeting with individuals from the academic community, from the mental health community. And so I think that I've done some due diligence as it relates to identifying the components that are necessary to create an effective program.
Lisa, Liz?
Yes, if I can. Chief, I appreciated it and respectfully hear that you're saying that I was supportive of this. Never. Not once was I supportive of this. We may have had some passing conversations about doing additional training, but never once was I told that training would therefore replace 66 to 85% of discipline. How could I agree to a model that I never even saw? I didn't see this model until I was presented with a PowerPoint on December 6th during a coffee meeting with the commander of the Internal Affairs Bureau. Also last year, I believe it was last year, between 2023 and 2024 and 2025, as a new monitor, I made an attempt to go to every single police district, every single shift change, every single roll call, to address every single officer that I could, let them know who I am, what I do, what we stand for, and how the OIM is involved in discipline. And occasionally people would say, well, wouldn't more training be better? Absolutely. I am not opposed to more training. I don't believe anyone is opposed to more training. It is a completely different thing when you're saying that there will be no accountability. There will only be training. And in fact, I believe it was District 5. I recall a particular roll call where I engaged with the officers for probably 45 minutes to an hour, and I was posed with the question, what about proposing training for A through C offenses? And I specifically asked, and I said, yeah, that's great, but with discipline, correct? And they said, no, instead of this. And I said, absolutely not. You cannot do that. You can't do that without the engagement of the community and without the permission of the community. So while we may have spoken about training, additional training, it was never presented to me or my office in this model. Further, the education-based discipline that I was presented with in December, and then got a call on January 1st at home and told that, hey, we're going forward with this, was never presented to me at the same time it was presented to other community members. So I would think that the OIM or the COB or City Council would have been the first place you go. That model was never presented to us, and then on January 1st, I was told we're going forward with this. I didn't even receive the draft policy until January 2nd. So I take exception to the fact that I was supportive of this. I have never been supportive of this because it did not exist, and I was not aware of it. And in fact, when I was asked about it, the one time I recall in a roll call, I said, absolutely not. So, I don't want this to be, this is not about who said what when. The problem is that the OIM was not approached, and we did not have any engagement as to what this policy should look like, what this draft should look like. Where is the problem? Can we do this short of completely changing the discipline system? We were a voice after the fact.
Dr. Lisa Calderon, I'll get to you in just one second because Karen Collier had a question. I think you addressed it in your opening statement, but I don't particularly know if I remember the answer. And Karen wants to know, why did you change the name from education-based discipline to education-based development?
Well, very specifically because, I think I'll just say that there are differing recollections for how this whole thing evolved, conversations that took place and when, and the spirit of those conversations. But, after Liz was presented with the framework, I didn't have any response to that I recall. And in fact, my first engagement with about what are you proposing doing was with the COB during one of my quarterly COB meetings. And it wasn't until after that I finally received some concerns about the concept, and then presented a policy. And during one of those back and forth between Liz and I, one of the things that she said is, well, you can't call this education-based discipline because it's really not discipline in my eyes. And I conceded the point. And I think, the one thing that I won't concede, though, is that this removes accountability. I don't necessarily believe that accountability equals pound of flesh. I think that accountability can also equal that you have acknowledged responsibility, taken ownership, which I think is what you said, and agreed to being trained so that you can understand exactly what you were supposed to do, and again, what the department and community expectation is.
Dr. Lisa Calderon, what's going through your mind? It's written all over your face. Like, what's going on?
I am trying to keep track of how many iterations that I have heard. Every time we hear this, it's something different. So this time, one of the things that's confusing is it's not discipline, but it is accountability. This is a discipline policy. And to be very clear, consultation is not consent. So many of us have sat around sat around the table with law enforcement, for example, looking at the use of force policy. Now that policy, maybe it's a few paragraphs or whatever, but each word on that page is significant. Now, when we sat down and helped to write that didn't mean that we were consenting to violations of that policy, which happened with the George Floyd protests. So just because we're sitting down and we're saying, yeah, it's a good idea to look at more effective forms of discipline doesn't mean that we consent to this version that's been put out. We also need to take a step back to let the audience know where this came from, and the reason why I think the name keeps changing is because it's tainted. It came from a corrupt sheriff in LA who was indicted by the federal government and was convicted. That's where this concept comes from, and he was trying to do a backdoor way of having lesser discipline on his sheriffs. So why would we take something with such a corrupt history and bring it here and then handpick academics who had worked with DPD in the past? That's not, and as speaking as an academic, that is not academically sound. You want to have an independent researcher evaluate your policy so it's completely free of bias. You don't create the outcome you want by selecting the team who will give you that outcome. We also had Dr. Tracy Kazee, former captain of DPD and should have been our first DPD chief, but wasn't, who is still very much active in the policing equity space. She had a forum with Chief Thomas and said, this is not academically sound. What's the problem you're trying to solve for? And if it's simply about quickening the process for discipline, then let's focus on that issue and not. It is a fundamental change to the matrix. You can look at the categories and see it is a fundamental change. There were things on there like anger problems that officers had that they would then get sent to a class for. Education is good. We already have those mechanisms for law enforcement. We are talking about discipline, and we won't go backwards for discipline. And then just, finally, in this age of Trump, where we're seeing increased militarization of police forces, and then we have a mayor who says the police chief can do what he wants. He doesn't have to keep consulting with the community about this. Is that really the way forward that we want in this city? Law enforcement is accountable to us. We pay their salaries. And so to be included after the fact and then to be told that this is not a fundamental change of policy is insulting to all of us who have been working for the past decade, 20 years or longer, to hold DPD accountable for its civil rights violations of community members.
Chief Thomas, when you're hearing this and then also going back to Karen's question about the changing of the name, just final thoughts or expanded thoughts on there. There are a couple of more questions. And for those of you who are wondering, we're spending time on this dynamic for right now, and we're going to move into other dynamics as well. But there are questions that we hope that there will be understanding as we walk out, whether it's an agreement or disagreement, but it should be a common understanding. So, of course, we're going to include more topics and more voices, et cetera. But going back to the reason for the name change and then some of the comments that you heard.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Well, the first thing I want to say is that I do agree strongly with Lisa that we and I am accountable to the community. That's unquestioned. But the reason for the change, again, and there has been multiple changes. There's been one change. It changed from education-based discipline to education-based development. That was because the monitor indicated that she didn't believe that discipline should be in the name. So I gave some careful thought and consideration as to what that should be, and because our ultimate goal is to further develop officers, that's where that name came from. And while I will certainly agree that education-based discipline is to some degree tainted because it was initiated by a sheriff who was later indicted indicted. I can't really speak to his justifications for doing that. But what I can say is that the policy still exists in LA County, and it exists in over 60 police departments across the country, both large and small. And while there may not be an academic base to say that this works, I do believe that it is being built because of those agencies that are engaged in the process now. I want to say too that our policy is significantly different than many other policies, because most other policies, to include Washington, D.C. and LA County, they actually allow for education-based development for infractions that would have been punished by up to a 30-day suspension. And I've never talked about including serious infractions like that. We're really only are talking about very low-level infractions.
There's a question about, in terms of this proposed discipline matrix, what evidence do you have to support its use? And then I think there's also a question about what is the cost analysis that is attached to this as well.
Appreciate that. So I think while I would argue that there is an evidence base that supports this, much of that evidence is outside of policing. So I understand that doesn't necessarily suffice, which is one of the reasons why I'm trying to create my own evidence base by having the outcomes studies so that we can determine whether or not this works. And the other commitment that I have made is that if this doesn't reduce recidivism, if this doesn't lower complaints, if this doesn't speed up the process, then there's no point in me continuing with such a concept.
And then the cost analysis.
Oh, I'm sorry. So, I don't really think that there's any cost associated with this at all. So, obviously the instructors that we are using are instructors that are already instructing in our academy, or other experts that we have engaged with previously. I suppose if we do find a need for or identify that there's a particular issue that we need an expert to come in and help train us and help us with greater understanding, maybe there would be a cost associated with that. But for the most part, we're using internal staff, and so there's really no cost to that.
Questions about the time frame. Where are we at? How is this approved? How does it move forward? And then Lanny would like to know: Would you be willing to pause implementing? Let me just look at the whole question so I can read through it. It looks like it says, will he pause implementing education-based discipline? Community has resoundingly said that the process for implementation and transparency to the Office of Independent Monitor and the Citizens Oversight Board both oppose it. And so that's a question as well.
Yeah. Well, I would say first, it's been significantly delayed. And I will wait for the right moment. Still, taking input. We did an initial survey where 78% of the people that were surveyed said that they supported the program. There's currently an opportunity for folks to provide feedback and make comments, suggestions on the website where the policy and the appendix are posted. And so I review that quite frequently and consider changes when those changes are offered.
We're going to switch topics in just a second, but I would like for both of you to just maybe close with a particular question that you would like to ask. And then I would like to also ask your opinions in terms of my thoughts and understanding of what I've heard in terms of this is not a change of the overall system. It is really attached to a portion of the system that addresses those A to B level offenses. And then I think my question to you, Chief, would be, this conversation about discipline or training, and training not being discipline. Is this a disciplinary dynamic, or is it a training dynamic? And how do you tease that out, or is it just semantics? So I'll just ask that question to you, and then ask the two of you to ask your questions.
It's likely semantics. At the end of the day, officers have violated some infraction, some policy or procedure that is in our manual, and after a thorough and complete investigation that is signified as such by the Office of the Independent Monitor, if we determine that it is something that is appropriate for education-based development, they will be made that offer. And if they accept the offer, then they will go through that training. Part of that training involves them taking accountability, ownership, again, as you said, of that, and agreeing to go through a class or classes to, again, understand what's expected of them by both the agency and the community. And I think that, I would imagine there's not a long line of people raising their hand to go to an 8 or 16 hour training class. And so I think that to some level, that in and of itself is accountability.
Okay. Dr. Lisa Calderon, Liz, final questions for the chief, and then if there'll be a couple of community members that have questions of whatever you would like to propose to the chief, if you could just switch seats with the two of them, and then we will hear from your questions as well.
I'd just like to address, first of all, because I really didn't want to get into an exchange back and forth about what happened when and who said what. On January 3rd, Chief, I sent you an email and I said, and the Director of Safety, and I said, please stop until we have had an appropriate time to look into this, make recommendations, and that request was denied by you. With regards to the policy in and of itself, I would just like to note that the Office of Police Complaints in Washington, D.C. indicated EBD in lieu of discipline demonstrates to officers that complaints from community members are insignificant and implies the community that the MPD endorses or at least tolerates police misconduct, further driving a wedge between citizens and police. Also, in the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, so this is where EBD originated. This was in the semi-annual report for special counsel for Los Angeles. We conclude that EBD program is well-intentioned but is in practice overbroad, overused. EBD was not able to prevent or minimize disturbing instances of apparent misconduct by deputies and supervisors. It adds fuel to the fire of those who allege that law enforcement is unwilling to punish and overly willing to protect its own. In its present form, we cannot endorse EBD. With regards to how the OIM is involved, the words thorough and complete, as the chief describes, is not in the policy. It is a part of our ordinance, and it has incredible significance because it is not a preliminary investigation or a minor investigation. It is a thorough and complete investigation. That language continues to not be used in the draft, even though we've asked for it. That request has been denied. So there is what is said, and then there's what is done. With change to, it completely changes the matrix system because you're no longer sustaining officers for misconduct. And the effect that has is the way the matrix system is set up is that if you have prior violations, just like a criminal defendant might, if you have prior violations, you're going to be receive a greater discipline sentence if you later commit more misconduct of the same level or a higher level. Because EBD it's not sustained, it is not disciplined, it cannot be used to later on, if you continue to commit violations, be held against you. And that is the problem we had before the matrix was adopted. So we're going back 17 years. Further, the training is already available. training is part of the matrix. The fact that this system is based upon trying, the goal is to train officers to better them, that is part of the matrix. It has been part of the matrix since 2008. The fact that they choose not to use it is their decision. That doesn't, one part doesn't lead to the other part. Accountability addresses the harm committed to the community, and not holding officers accountable and sustaining these violations does impact the system. It does change the system. The matrix is a part of the discipline handbook. The discipline handbook sets forth how discipline is done. And it says, if there is a finding that the offense was likely committed, you must sustain the officer. There must be a sustained finding. That is not EBD, and that would change the entire system. And finally, I would just like to say that, again, we could talk about this for hours in the intricacy of the discipline system. I encourage the community to watch the chief's presentation to City Council, watch the OIM's presentation to City Council, most recently his presentation to the Citizen Oversight for more information, detail, and community input as to what the problems are with EBD.
So as of right now, you're saying, I'm assuming you're saying the Office of the Independent Monitor does not support this at this time.
We do not. There is no evidence or research to say that this makes the community, that this gives the community more accountability, makes the community safer, or does anything different than traditional discipline does. It does not impact recidivism. There is no research to support that. So for all of those reasons, no, we do not support this.
Dr. Lisa Calderon, final question or thoughts as we get prepared to move into some different topics.
Yeah, I think it was Councilman Paul Cashman who said it best after hearing the chief's presentation following the monitor's presentation on separate days, and that was, clearly you two are not on the same page, and we need you all to be on the same page. There were several council members with severe concerns about this, and the reason why it's slowed down is because we have slowed it down. As community, as a monitor's office, as a citizen oversight board, we said there needs to be more transparency in how this is being rolled out. It is very, very, very concerning that the chief is implementing a model that is not evidence-based. That is not insignificant. You know, usually when you implement things, we have meta-analysis. That means a study of studies. We have lots of data on whether something works and why it works and not. And the reason why evidence-based practices is not appropriate for what the chief is proposing is because of the power differential between the police officer and the victim of police brutality. And initially, this was sold as an evidence-based practice, and we had to prove through our own research that it is not. And then just in terms of the money, there is always a cost. There's always a cost to everything. We are, as a city, in a budget crisis, and the police department has not taken one hit while other people have been laid off, and civilians, including crime prevention workers, they have been laid off. These are people who work for youth crime intervention. They have been laid off. But somehow, no hits to the police department, to the sheriff department, as far as dollars. So yes, there is always a cost. And so I would just say to everyone who is watching is that, you know, we deserve better. We deserve transparency. We need to be at the table. If we're really going to create an evidence-based practice, that means having an independent researcher. That means having focus groups. And you don't just go to the people who are most likely to call the police, because that's who was surveyed. You go to the people who are least likely to call the police because they don't trust them. They've been brutalized by them. They don't think that their input is going to be valued, but there's a way to get those folks input. And that's why, Brother Jeff, we propose to you that we have this town hall here, because those are the voices that have been missing from this process.
Okay, thank you so much. And Chief, I want to give you just the final thoughts on this point, and then there are two individuals that have questions for the chief.
Sure.
If you would just grab those seats. And then Joyce Miller in the comments says, why can't all officers receive the education-based development so that when they commit crimes against the public, they can be disciplined according to police policies?
First, I just want to say that I actually agree with many of Dr. Calderon's points. But I will say, though, that while, again, I would argue that there is an evidence base building, certainly in this particular context with police, there are a lot of things that police agencies, to include the Denver Police Department, do that aren't necessarily evidence-based, but we still do them because we believe they're the right things to do. Case in point is active bystandership in law enforcement. Not something that is endorsed by any particular police agency, but I believe that it is important to train officers in how to intervene, and I think that bystandership is a fundamental of bystandership in law enforcement, and so just because we don't have an evidence base I don't think that means that we shouldn't do it. The other thing that I don't think that there's a strong evidence base in is I think that there are a lot of arguments on both sides, and I think strong arguments on both sides. I don't think that there is an evidence base to show that police departments shouldn't engage in low-level stops without significant cause. But that is, and I want to again give credit to Dr. Lisa Calderon and the Reimagine Policing and Public Safety Task Force for first introducing the concept of low-level stops. But that is something that I developed. Didn't impanel some blue ribbon panel in order to do it. I understood that it was the right thing to do. I understood the disparate impact that comes from officers making lower level stops that have no safety nexus, and so I instituted that policy, despite the fact that there isn't necessarily an evidence base to show that it either improves safety or detracts from safety.
In terms of this conversation and so much questions being generated, do you anticipate it slowing down and getting more input or addressing some of what you heard, or do you continue moving forward in terms of the direction that you've been going?
Well, again, I think that I have slowed significantly. I think I continue to take in public voice and public comment, and certainly will incorporate that in deciding whether or not to move forward or how I move forward, and so that commitment remains.
Okay, going to more questions. Regina, you got a question for Chief Thomas.
I do. So if an officer had already been previously disciplined for anything, and they wind up doing another infraction.
And talk into that mic.
Another infraction within another year, 2 years, something the same or similar. How is it decided when they will continue to move on?
And when you say move on, what is?
Meaning, are they going to be disciplined
Great.
one way or the other?
Yeah, so great question. So first of all, as I said, more than half of all of our infractions are ineligible for consideration. The other thing that makes an infraction ineligible for consideration is if they've done it again or done it previously. So if someone has violated a particular rule and received either discipline or received education-based development, they're not going to get that opportunity again. If it is, if we can identify that it is a pattern of conduct, like they seem to have a complete misunderstanding of our rule book, and so they don't necessarily violate the same rule, but they violate numerous rules within the operations manual. They're not going to be given education-based development. Third consideration is if it's identified through the thorough and complete investigation that this is willful conduct, they're not getting education-based development. They're only getting education-based development if this is truly a mistake of the head. I didn't know the policy. I didn't understand what I was supposed to do.
With a follow-up on that, and it kind of touches on Joyce's question in the chat about why can't all officers receive this education-based development. What would be an example of something an officer would be trained on or taught about that other officers don't necessarily have? Or is this like a reminder or refresher? How does that work?
So, hopefully everyone can appreciate the difficulty of understanding every single policy in our policy manual. Our operations manual is thicker than a phone book. Back in the old days when we had the really thick thing. Anyway, and so I think it is reasonable that that an officer could be completely unaware of a particular policy. So I've given this example before. So let's say that you get in a car accident and you happen to be right on the border between Denver and Aurora, and you call Denver police. A Denver police officer shows up, and he says, "Ma'am, I can't take your accident report because this is Aurora, and I can't take an accident report for an accident that occurred in Aurora." So he leaves, tells you need to call Aurora. So you call Aurora, and Aurora says, "Nope, this is Denver, and we can show you on the map that this is Denver." And so you end up having to call another Denver police officer to come back and take your accident report. Now, you've probably wasted 5 hours of your day. Now you're pissed, rightfully so. And so you make a complaint about this officer not taking the report when he first came and should have taken that report. Now, there is a policy that says when there is a jurisdictional dispute, Denver should take the report. And so he should have known that. He should have known that he should have taken that report and not said, "Call Aurora," even though he thought it was Aurora. So the training that he would go through would be twofold. One, it would be getting him to understand what that particular policy and similar policies related to traffic accidents and jurisdictional disputes, making sure that he clearly understands that. The other thing that I would want him to clearly understand, that we would make sure that occurred through training, is understanding what your expectation as a citizen is and the impact that you had in having to waste half of your day to, it was already traumatic enough that you were involved in a car accident. So I think he needs to feel that and understand that and know that going forward, that, the things that I do have impact. Does that help?
It does.
Thank you.
All right, Karen, a question for you. And Chief, when I was hearing that answer, I was saying, and I don't know, I probably was thinking multiple things. I would be like, why would that officer think they were in Aurora?
Well, so
Like if I'm a Denver police officer and I'm like, what are you doing in Aurora?
So I mean, as you know, like.
And I know them boundaries are real, especially by Yosemite and all that.
I'm aware of a situation where a community member actually thought that they were in Commerce City when they were in fact in
Absolutely.
Denver, and didn't feel that the officer should be enforcing the law where he was, because she thought he was in. And so I think it's not just confusing for officers at times. I think it's confusing for the community as well.
I'm confused sometimes because when you go down, I think Peoria, you could be in Adams County or something.
Yes.
In just a moment, and you're like, I thought I was in Denver. Karen, your thoughts?
Good
Or
afternoon,
question.
Chief.
Good afternoon. Good to see you.
Good to see you. My question is, you have referenced the time frame between when a complaint is filed or when a policy violation has been discovered, and the time it takes to get to resolution.
Yes.
My question is whether or not there has been an examination of that process in way of streamlining the process, and if not, why not?
So I would say yes, we have looked at that. We have done some things to try to streamline that. We have tried to streamline that by, because the end of the process is the conduct review hearing that the officer has, where there's a conversation about the infraction and whether or not it should be sustained, and if so, what the penalty should be. So that's like the end of the road. And so we have done things like, if we can agree to an outcome for some of those lower level things, then we can not even go through that meeting. So we have made some adjustments after identifying that there is a very lengthy process. We have, I know that, the monitor has her own challenges with her staff, but, I have, as best I could, tried to provide adequate staffing in our Internal Affairs Bureau in order to get those cases through the process, and then if there are requests for additional investigation, to make sure that those investigations are completed timely. But again, I don't want to assign any blame for why the process takes so long. It just does. From the point that the monitor acknowledges that an investigation is thorough and complete, to being reviewed by the Conduct Review Office to determine whether or not it is sustained, and if so, what the appropriate penalty should be using the matrix, it can take months. And then what happens is everything goes to the back of a very long line. And so what I'm trying to do is for the cases where it's appropriate, and I think we're talking about, I don't know what the number of cases it will be that will be appropriate, to keep them from going to the back of that very long line, so that long line shortens and we can get to resolutions much more quickly. Because again, not only do I want to provide the training and education for those officers that violate those very low-level infractions as quick as I can, those officers that need significant discipline or actually need to be separated from the force, I want to be able to do that much more quickly as well.
Okay. Karen, does that satisfy your question?
No, but I'll accept it.
Thank you.
Okay. Chief, you've been in policing for quite a while, and so I know you've seen a lot of different iterations of how policing has been done, and of course you've studied this profession, so you know the different dynamics of policing. Marco makes a point saying that, of course, this is an important conversation for the community, and then goes on to say, unfortunately, it will not move the needle, and nothing will change for us and our community until policing moves away from the centralized headquarters model and moves back into the communities with smaller stations, usually staffed by people who live in that community, as it used to be. Nothing will change. It will remain them against us, which is different. They are us. Any thoughts? It seems like a shift in terms of policing in that question.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. First of all, we have 6 police districts, so the city is divided into 6 police districts. Some may think that those areas of responsibility are too large, but we do have officers assigned to smaller precincts that they're responsible for. I agree with the point that it's better to have officers from the community serve the community. I'm a Denver resident, have been proud to serve this community and work in all areas of this community, even the community that I grew up in. I know for a fact that the commander of District 5, in fact, lives in District 5. And so I do think that is an important point. I think the difficulty, though, is that, I need 1,600 officers in order to manage a very large workload. And it would be difficult to have all 1,600 of those individuals come from neighborhoods and then dispatch them to those neighborhoods so that they could patrol their own neighborhoods. And so certainly it is a benefit. It's a benefit that I take advantage of as often as I can, and it is something that we do take advantage of. But because of the volume, it's really quite impossible to have a force of individuals who come from these neighborhoods. But the other thing that I would say is I don't necessarily think that you have to come from a neighborhood or come from a community in order to care about a community.
That being said, I want to go to some young people who have been very active in leadership and community and hear what they have to say, and then also questions they may have for you. Introduce yourself and ask your questions or make your comments.
Hey everybody, we're here. We're with the Struggle of Love on the gun violence prevention team. We really just came. We're just really young. We're in the community, like we're actively helping, trying to figure out how we can help you guys as well. We really just wanted to ask, like, what is the dynamics and how many times going with the training does your training involve going through, like, throughout the year? Like, how many times do you do, like, reviews? Do you guys go through and have them give you a small review of what, like, what's supposed to go on, and just like the levels of force and being able to deal with everybody that's in the community, as long as, like, knowing, like, there's people out there that have mental problems as well. That's kind of hard to deal with, and I understand it's always you guys' safety too. But what is a point of, like, what is the point to where you get to understand, like, okay, it could be something a little wrong with them too? What's the technique that you guys could use to understand that, to where you can be less lethal or understand the dynamics of what's going on?
Yeah,
in your head
great
too?
question. And please tell Coach I said hello.
Yes, sir.
So, all of our officers go through, I think, about 1,000 hours of training in the academy prior to coming on the police department. And then they go through about 16 weeks of field training. They also go through, once they've graduated the academy, they also go through crisis intervention training, another implementation that started because of Paul Childs. And so all of our officers do have the kind of training that helps them understand it doesn't allow them to diagnose. We're certainly never going to be experts in order to be able to diagnose what kind of mental health challenge someone may have, but it can certainly help us understand that there may be a mental health challenge or potentially a substance misuse challenge with an individual that they're dealing with, and help them, at least de-escalate or help them, deal with that situation and that individual, and help get them to the help that they need. We have co-responders that ride with a number of our officers in each police district that these are actually experts that help us identify individuals and identify the best way to handle their challenge. And then we have outreach case coordinators in every district too that are really kind of the home run hitters, where they are able to connect with these individuals and help them. So I think our officers and our co-responders do a great job of helping people when they're in crisis, when they're contacted by officers. But these outreach case coordinators help, address some of their more long-term issues by, connecting them with long-term services. But great question.
Have you guys ever thought about implementing, like, a training for certain communities, like, the different diversities, the different races? I feel like District 5, the officers in there should have an additional training on, like, not necessarily how to deal with the community, but more like how to interact with them. I don't know, not to say that you guys don't do a good job interacting with our community, just like I don't know. I didn't really understand the situation where the man got shot, I just feel like there could have been a non-lethal way to do that. He didn't have to die. So I that's what I mean by the additional training in our community for those officers.
Great questions. And let me finish the question that you asked, which is about training. And so in addition to our academy training, so every year every officer has to go through 24 hours of additional training, and it could be more if there are other contemporary topics that we feel like or maybe are legislatively mandated that we train officers in. And 12 of those hours have to be in what we call perishable skills, which is firearms and arrest control and driving. I think that that's a great point, and actually something that I'm proud to have thought of quite some time ago. So we have a program called Before the Badge, and what Before the Badge is the first 2 weeks that an officer starts in our police academy, they don't do any classroom work. They don't do anything about learning how to be a police officer. They spend those first 2 weeks going to various communities across the city and understanding those communities, understanding reasons for historic mistrust, understanding how to better engage with those communities for 2 weeks. So they are learning about Denver communities before they even learn how to be police officers. And I think that's important because a lot of our academy recruits don't even come from this city. And or if they do come from this city, they don't get assigned to the district that they used to live in. Like perfect example is myself. I grew up in Southeast Denver. I was assigned to Northeast Denver, a very different community when I first got out of the academy, and I certainly would have appreciated gaining an understanding of the various cultures and differences in those communities. And so that's what I try to do now. Now, after they graduate from the academy and they go to their respective districts, each district has their own process. So they all have kind of a limbo week. And so this is kind of a week where they're really not judged on anything. They really aren't given any specific field training. But what they are, what does happen is they meet with groups and individuals within that community. Like District 5 officers will meet with Coach I and meet with Diane Cooks and other folks in the far Northeast to understand the challenges in the community in Police District 5.
And you two don't go anywhere because we're going to shift this conversation in terms of East High School violence in these schools. And what that looks like. It's a major concern, and also noted in the questions. I want to also ask about Niecy Murray. There was this controversy about reducing the mental capacity or training or diagnosis of recruits, and then handling it after they became a part of the police force. If I remember this dynamic correctly. How are those recruits being assessed in terms of their mental stability and ability to handle the stress and the strains of policing?
So during the application process, pre-hire, they go through mental health screening. They go through psychological testing, and then once they pass a majority of the training, they're given a conditional offer that allows us to go even deeper with medical history and psychological history. And so they actually get two medical, or both medical and mental health diagnoses, which I don't think is necessarily best practice, but it is something that we currently do.
Oh, okay, let's go into the Denver Police Department and the Department of Safety inside of the Denver Public School System. How do they interact? How do they engage? And I know that there was recently in the news, a gun, a student that was found with a gun inside of East High School and was, I believe, handcuffed, maybe even arrested. I don't know. Can you give an update on that, weapons in school, school safety, and all of those concerns?
I can. And so, as you know, there was a period of time where we didn't have school resource officers in schools. They have been back for probably 3 years now. I instituted a program because I understood one of the challenges that we had when we did have officers in school is there was an awful lot of citations and arrests that were being made. And I didn't think that we needed to be making that many arrests. And so I developed an alternative to citation program. And so we have gone from making hundreds of arrests in schools to making a substantially lower number of arrests. And I ask questions every day about the arrests that actually are made. Is this a situation where we needed to make an arrest? And most often, it is either because there was a victim who wanted the person that assaulted them or violated them personally to be criminally charged. Or it was a school administrator who insisted that a law enforcement intervention was best. I continue to work with the school system to try to incorporate more less enforcement solutions to what I call juvenile and school behavior. Now, going back to the gun that was recovered in East High School, I believe yesterday, or maybe I think it was Thursday actually. So I think in this situation, thankfully, the systems that are in place work, and so there's really two systems that are in place. One is the Safe to Tell system, where students can report to a system by sending a text message, letting them know that someone has made a threat against the school, letting them know that someone is in possession of a weapon, and so that system is in place and that works. We get a lot of tips that we act upon. The other thing that I think is working and successful is because of the relationships that our school resource officers have developed inside the schools that they're working, they get information from students. And so I think in this case, it was a student who reported to the school resource officer that they knew that a particular student had a gun. And so we contacted that student and was able to detain them, and then ultimately did find a handgun in their backpack.
Young people, do you have any questions as it relates to the school year, what's going on in terms of school education, et cetera, that you'd like to share or ask the chief about from a student standpoint?
So from a student standpoint is, although he was caught with the handgun, did anybody question and ask why he particularly had it and what was the cause of him having, did anybody give him any resources to help him if he had went through any trauma or anything as well? Because I just feel like those are things that kind of trigger up the things, because bullying can lead to it. He could be going through it and people are targeting him with something, or some outside entities are going on. And it could just lead to a thing of him feeling safe as well. I just wanted to know if there's anything that was done to help him as well, instead of just taking it and taking him too.
And then also, can you generalize it in terms of maybe not specifically to this young person, but what are you hearing from young people in general about why they are carrying these weapons and what support they have?
So, great question, great point. Yes, those questions are asked. Yes, we do try to identify those reasons. Many times, unfortunately, what young people tell us is the reason why I had a gun is because everybody else has a gun, or because I feel the need to protect myself against somebody else. And so we do understand that. And then, going beyond that, there is a program through the DA's office called the Handgun Intervention Program that young people that have a nonviolent gun offense, and I think this qualifies as a nonviolent gun offense because he just had a gun in his possession, didn't shoot anybody, didn't threaten anybody, and so I'm certain that he will be given that opportunity to go through that program and maybe get to some of those issues that led to him possessing that gun in the first place.
Final question or final thought for the chief?
Do you guys, because of that situation, do you guys plan on implementing anything else into East or any other schools as far as safety measures?
Not at this time, no, but certainly open to hearing from students about what is going to make them feel safer.
Do you think it's needed?
I don't think that I don't think I need to put more officers at East High School. I don't think we need to be searching every young person's backpack. I don't think that we need to do that. I'm really hopeful that this is an isolated situation. Again, I think that there are systems in place, the Safe to Tell system, as well as just school resource officers having relationships with students so that they can get that information so that we can identify those situations and handle them appropriately.
Rayshawn, and as two more people take those seats, here's a question from Darrell, and it involves nonviolent crimes, and it reads, "It seems to me that violent crimes is mostly what I hear about when it comes to safety in our community. My question is, what about nonviolent crimes such as the way people park in Montbello, cars with no or expired plates, theft that is causing stores to close? What is DPD's plan for these situations?"
Great question again. So, yes, we have been talking about violent crime primarily, the significant reductions that we've seen in homicides and non-fatal shootings. And mostly that is because those are our citywide goals that we have been hoping to achieve, and so those are the things that we have been talking about, and those are the things that we have been implementing many of our strategies toward. However, the mayor and I both recognize that that just because we have some significant reductions in violent crime, it doesn't necessarily make Denver feel like a safe city. I go to community meetings all the time where I will report our progress, and people will say, doesn't really feel like such a safe city to me. And I understand that. I understand that often what drives people's perception of safety is, the things that they see. So if they see open drug use, if they see or they are aware of the fact that the restaurant or the grocery store that they used to go to is now closed, or everything that they want to buy in a particular establishment is locked behind a cage, I think that helps give folks the impression that it's not safe. And so that's why we have increased our diligence around retail theft and addressing some of the challenges, the open air drug use and things like that. And I think that that is one of the focuses of the mayor's Road to Recovery program is to provide solutions to those particular challenges. Now, as it relates to parking in Montbello, certainly available offline to get more detail about that. It would also be helpful, I think, if you reached out to Commander Penn in Police District 5 to help him understand what those challenges are so he can be responsive to that. But as it relates to expired registrations, I get a lot of folks complaining about seeing license plates that are expired. And I have two things that I want to say about that is that generally, if someone's license plate is expired, 30 days, I consider that to be not safety related. I consider that to be low level. I recognize how there could be disparate impact if we went out and did significant enforcement on lower level infractions like that. And so that's why I generally, the policy precludes that, with the exception of, there are times during the year, often in conjunction with the state, where we modify the policy to allow for officers to engage in, citing people for expired registrations. And what we tend to see is when we do that, we see that there's a significant increase in people registering their vehicles. So I hear the complaint. I understand the complaint. Certainly, the license plate that have been expired for a significant period of time, I don't consider that to be a low-level violation. I would expect officers to be making those stops and inquiring, why is someone driving around with a license plate that has been expired for a year, or a vehicle that doesn't even have a license plate on it. Those are, I think, justifications for officers making those stops and inquiring about that.
Chief, can you speak to violent crime being down, and does that apply to the black community as well? And how is that information disaggregated? Because recently there was a shooting in Green Valley Ranch just over the weekend, and then I understand there have been multiple shootings that have taken place in and around Downing Street. Can you give an update on what's taking place? Do you see that as interrelated? And then what do we need to know in terms of the community about, the message of violent crime being down, but in our community we are constantly hearing about violence being a daily reality?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that violent crime, particularly shootings, homicides, those are the kinds of things that do and should shock the conscience. Those are the things that I think that gets people's attention. And so, there have been substantial reductions, like I said, in both violent crime and gun crime. So even including the most recent homicides and non-fatal shootings, today, there have been 30 homicides in Denver, and I would have to look at a breakdown to see, the racial breakdown of those victims and even the racial breakdown of those suspects. I would imagine that the black and brown communities are severely impacted by those events. But I do think that there has been some substantial change in that kind of activity in our city. Last year, at this time, there were over 160 non-fatal shootings, and there's only been 120 to this moment, and so about a 25% reduction in those things. And so while I understand and appreciate the fact that it just seems like these things happen very frequently in our community, and it's certainly a tragedy, I think the thing that as a community I think we need to focus on is we really need to continue to work hard on removing guns from our community altogether. I think that far too often there are people that are in our community that are carrying guns and then end up doing things foolishly with guns. We have our officers have a lot of armed encounters with individuals that are carrying guns, and I'm thankful that the overwhelming majority of those end non-violently.
Can you give us an update on what happened in Green Valley Ranch and what has happened over on Downing and in and around the area just in these past few days?
So I believe that there was a homicide that occurred in Green Valley. There were some witnesses to that situation. I believe that the suspect has been identified, turned themselves in. So I believe that situation is resolved. There was a shooting on Downing recently and on York recently where thankfully no one lost their life. There were some individuals that were struck by gunfire. There is a suspicion at this point in time that there was some gang involvement in both of those incidents. That's what the evidence is leading us to believe at this time. And so, again, situations where there are just far too many guns in our community in the hands of people that shouldn't have them.
Rayshawn.
Thanks, Brother Jeff. Appreciate you always being in this space for us. And thank you, Chief Thomas. I mean, there's a lot of chiefs in this country who would not be here and discuss with us at length the way that you have. So I just appreciate and respect you for that.
Thank you.
So you know that I want to go back to the accountability changes. We have fought long and hard for the Office of Independent Monitor, and it's there because we need other people involved who are not police involved in police discipline. And I know that and we've discussed many times that like that's fair for us to expect and demand. I am trying to understand. I have a couple questions. I think I have a question, but I need to understand a couple things just for clarity, and like what the changes you're suggesting mean. I was looking through your suggestions, at least the draft that was in the newsletter from this event, and I saw a couple different things. There's a long table of infractions that one could commit as a police officer, and what the new process that you're proposing would call for as the kind of consequence, or the training that they would be given. And so one of them was the infraction was just listed as giving name and badge, and I'm sure there's like a series of things. But it said that the training that if an officer had an infraction involving giving their name and badge number, i.e. refusing to do so, which is how we know that officers try to avoid accountability in the first place, because we just don't know who was that masked man sometimes, but also like that officer. It says that the only education that they would be getting is listed as emotional intelligence, and for a different infraction like removal of reports and records, which again is a thing that I'm concerned about, police taking out things that would help us hold them accountable, that the recommended training is only listed as health and wellness training. I'm sure that there's a lot in those trainings. I'm just trying to for those two examples, can you help me understand why my level of skepticism, why should I trust that one of your officers who refused to give me his name and badge because he knew that I was going to report him to you or to the Office of Independent Monitor should get emotional intelligence training, why that would help me, why I should be reassured that that's going to fix anything. And same for the removal of reports being a health and wellness training.
Do you know what page that particular one is on, or what the?
Let me get my glasses.
Well, while you look, let me just so the first situation, if you asked somebody for their badge number and they refused to give it to you. And there isn't an officer on the job who knows that when they're asked for their badge number that they should give it in a reasonable situation. Now, if so, I think what is important to say with that particular infraction is just because it is listed as something that is eligible doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to agree to allow them to have education-based development. So if they were let's say they were discourteous to you. Let's say that they did something else inappropriate, and let's say that you observe them use force, and then you come up and say, "Hey, can I get your badge number because I want to report what I just saw?" And they don't provide it to you. They're not getting education-based development for that. And so each.
I'm sorry to interrupt. How do we know that? Like, why? You said you're not giving. I believe you that you wouldn't say like you can go ahead and go to class for that if they refuse to give me their badge number because they know I'm gonna hold them accountable. But are you signing off on each and every single one of these? Is it like what's the process? I don't understand. I think that's part of our problem,
the process would be the process would be just like the process that currently exists. There would be a full investigation, so we would identify all of the facts and circumstances of that particular incident. Liz in her office would acknowledge that was a thorough and complete investigation, and then we would take a look at whether or not this is an appropriate situation for education-based development. In the fact pattern that you have laid out, I would say the answer to that is no.
Can you give me, because again, I'm just trying to help understand so I can get to like a bigger question that I have, if it's appropriate, is can you help me understand in a situation in which there is an infraction? Because I'm trying to just look at the thing. So your question about the page number, I clicked on the link that was listed as your suggested, the title of this document is the Operations Manual of
Yeah.
Denver Police Department. It's on page 7, 6 of 7. There's a couple different tables where these are listed. It looks like we're looking at the same thing. On page, and just those are and that's all it says. It just says giving name and badge, and there's I'm sure there's codes next to them. I'm sure there's like a deeper thing. But just to not even have to get into the weeds of that, I'm trying to help me understand. I would like your help understanding in what situation is an infraction along that category of giving name and badge number going to be helped by emotional intelligence training? Like, can you help me understand where that would be appropriate and why I should believe that that's going to correct the problem?
Again, I think it's two things. So again, fact dependent, and so while that might be one of the modules that officer would go through, we would also go through a module specific to that infraction, specific to giving name and badge number, so they clearly understand that is something that they are required to do, generally regardless of circumstance. I would imagine there are some circumstances
Sure, if
where
they're running into a burning building.
yes,
you can't stop them.
exactly. And so
Yeah.
helping them better understand that. And so maybe the circumstances that the officer somehow felt threatened by the way that he was approached, and that was why he didn't provide his name and badge number. And so I do think that there is an opportunity through addressing his emotional intelligence to better understand. And I also think that part of that emotional intelligence is getting to understanding that community impact. So the impact that had on you, and how him not giving you his badge number eroded your trust in the police department. So
Thank you. That's genuinely helpful. And I wonder if you can help with that sort of same clarity on the removal of reports and records being a health and wellness training sort of prescription. Like, why would health and wellness training help me feel more secure that officer is not going to remove more reports and records in the future, or that they have been sufficiently held accountable for doing so?
Without specifically knowing what that
Make me a hypothetical in which it makes
okay,
sense.
so
my question.
like I'm trying to think of what would constitute that infraction. So let's say the infraction is I removed these records relative to this particular investigation, or removed this piece of evidence from the property bureau, and then I didn't put it back when I was supposed to put it back, or I didn't refile this report where it was supposed to be filed. And it was discovered that, hey, this evidence is missing, or this report is missing. Oh, yeah, I still have that. I just forgot it. It's in my locker. And so maybe there is an opportunity for them to to benefit from some health and wellness education, but also again, they need to understand the policy, why it's there, and the impact that a violation of that policy, in this particular case, has on the agency, but potentially could have on a case.
Okay, that's helpful. So this is helpful, and I promise I'm not going to take up too much more time. It helps me understand some of why what you're proposing would make sense, and I hope that you've also understood why some of what we read as people who are skeptical of police and whether we ever hold them accountable at all, sounds kind of crazy. That without deeper explanation and understanding, like, this sounds like, oh, you're just gonna, this guy can deny me, try to hide from accountability, and you're gonna talk to him about emotional wellness. Like, it comes off wrong from a bunch of people, an institution that's been coming off wrong to our community for a long time.
Fair.
Wow.
And so I can tell you that as a long-term police accountability advocate, I would be able to trust this if my question is, would you be open to going through this matrix, this list of things that you are expanding as and making eligible for education-based discipline development, what have you? Would you go through infraction by infraction with the Office of Independent Monitor and the task force, representatives of the task force to reimagine policing, and talk with them and go through and like renegotiate some of what's eligible, what's not, and what kind of trainings it should be eligible for, so that our community's representatives can have a say in the process of what we're going to have the consequences be for these individual actions. Because I think that if that sort of process took place, we would feel a lot better about this. Would you be open to such a process with the OIM and the reimagining task force?
Yes, and I have to say that.
Are you willing to commit to it?
Yes, and so, but I will say that generally has taken place already, and so.
Do you? I don't hear people agreeing with you. So maybe if it's done, let's do it clear, let's do it slower.
Hold on.
Yeah.
There's a different question on the floor.
Okay.
And I just kind of want to chime in on this. It sounds like there have been individuals that were involved, and it sounds like there are others who have been involved that have not been involved. And you mentioned, the task force, Office of Independent, whomever they might be, and you asked a specific question, and the chief said yes. And so, without going back and forth to who was or who wasn't involved, I think that your question, Rayshawn, is, would you be open to having input from some very specific groups that may have been left out or perceived as left out to get more buy-in to the collective process? Does that make sense? I'm just amending what you said.
That's a friendly amendment. You got me, Brother Jeff, yeah.
And I think the chief said yes.
That's what I heard him say.
Yes. I mean, again, I've gone through the 120 plus recommendation, or it's over 130 specifications. I've gone through those. Initially, what I said is things that could be eligible, or anything that was in category A through C. Amended that pretty significantly, had a lot of help from the Office of the Independent Monitor, who identifies certain specifications that she didn't believe should be eligible, and to a large degree, I've agreed with her.
Helen,
Thank you.
we're in our final moments, and Helen, I'd love for you to get your question in or comment.
My statement, my comment, and my concern is for community. I'm not here representing independent monitoring, because I got questions in concern with their process and their procedure. In them reevaluating community and bringing us aboard, I haven't seen any of that. Brother Jeff, I love you, right? But I don't appreciate the back and forth conversation you guys had without including community, because I thought that's what we're here for, not a battle between who's right and who's wrong and what the circumference of a square is. There's community in this room, right? And they haven't had a chance to speak up. Okay, there's community in this room that's been excluded.
Let me
There
just,
were
I
let me
get it. No,
finish. There were
let me just
two
ask you
kids-
something. Let me just ask you something, Mother Helen, specifically before this turns in a different direction, because I'm going to give you some context. Rather than saying what didn't happen and who is or who isn't community, because everybody in here is community. Young people spoke. The opportunity for individuals to step up to that microphone has spoken. Individuals were able to give their comments in advance to have those questions asked, which the police chief addressed initially. Now, when you say community, it would be better for you to say, my name is Helen and this is what I want to say, as opposed to what everybody else
Okay,
wanted to say.
my
So
name is Helen.
as a community person, ask your question. I appreciate your criticism, but if you're speaking on behalf of community or yourself, then do that right now, because that's why that microphone is available. So my point and my request in this short time is to hear your question to the chief as it relates to whatever you want him to address.
Okay, this is my question. Yesterday, I got kind of told off by somebody named Daryl Militant. I think that's his name. Daryl Militant in another part of the city, right? He had a common sense question for me that I could not answer, okay? So my question for you, and this includes the independent monitoring, is that those two kids had more humane opportunities to objectively relate to you, and we received something on a positive and productive opportunity. This is not about who's right or who's wrong. This is about us examining people in our spaces, Centennial, right, with a good record for elevating what could have been tragic situations, right? And I have that information. But I say that nobody's perfect. And you always listen to me, both of you. But it's time for everybody to do their homework, including the independent monitoring. Including the independent monitoring. All of this verbiage, words, and gestures that you make going to what the circumference of a square is, we're not numbers, right? There's problems in community that there's not been addressed, okay? I'm talking to everybody, because y'all know how I am. I'm real transparent. But all of that speaking instead of the community speaking, to me, I'm just going to say it, was kind of disrespectful. Okay?
Okay.
If you're representing community, how are you choosing those people to be a part of what you're doing? It's everything you think. Well, guess what? I'm dropping the mic. I don't think the way you think.
Okay. That being said, I guess, Dr. Davis, you get to go from there, and I believe we've got just a few more moments before the chief wraps up. And again, this is not just the final opportunity we have to spend with the police chief or anybody else in our community. Dr. Davis,
I have to say
microphone is
first, I think it's unfair that the preacher in the room only gets 5 minutes to speak.
Yeah. No. That being said, protocol being established, Dr. Davis.
Now, the preacher in the room is sitting in the back. My bishop, Bishop Dillon. That's the preacher. I don't know what they call me, but that's the preacher over there. But I appreciate the courtesy. I wanted to just make two very quick observations. My name is Robert Davis, and I represent the Denver Task Force to Reimagine Policing and Public Safety. Observation number one, and they're both built off of what Brother Rashawn Bliss just said a moment ago. Observation number one, as it relates to community input, I've been in conversation with Together Colorado, representatives from the Denver Task Force from the Greater Metro Denver Ministerial Alliance and others. And my understanding, based on multiple conversations, is that this proposal has been presented. But what we're asking for is not for a presentation. For instance, today, Brother Jeff, you're doing a question and answers. This is not a forum or a committee whereby the specifics are being hashed out. This is just we're having a conversation. What we're asking for is not a conversation where you meet with various community groups and say, this is our proposal, here's the PowerPoint presentation, etc., and this is what we're planning to do, and then answer questions. What we're saying is we're looking for something akin to the use of force policy, akin to how the Matrix was formed in the first place back in, I understand, 2008. That was before my time, where the community comes together, not just the Denver Task Force, not just the independent monitors, but there are other organizations around this city that have a vested interest, Denver Justice Project, just to name a few, the NAACP, et cetera, who have a vested interest in the safety of this community and have a track record of being engaged in these conversations, that we need to make sure they're not only at the table, but that they have significant, thorough input to the final outcome. That can only take place if you convene such an ongoing gathering, such an ongoing committee, or whatever term you want to use to refer to it. That has not happened, and that's what we're pushing back on. And that's what we are demanding today take place, so that we keep in the spirit of how the original discipline matrix was formed in the first place. The second thing, and this is something that came up when Brother Rashawn was speaking, is that when he brought up several infractions, you assured us that those infractions would not be eligible for education-based development, education-based discipline. And herein lies the problem, and this is why community needs to be involved, because we cannot base a policy on the personality of the chief. Once this becomes policy, future chiefs are going to rely on this. And if future chiefs don't share the same philosophical approach to officer discipline that you do, they can use this policy to get their officers out of accountability to the community. So while you are assuring us that you will not do that, but we don't know, to be honest with you, we don't know if any of us are going to be here tomorrow. We don't know if you're going to be the chief for the next 10 years, 10 weeks, or 10 days. That's just the nature of appointees in political positions. So what we need is a policy that is not dependent on the personality of whoever the chief is. Lastly, as an example, we did all of this work under your predecessor, your former boss, Chief White, around the use of force policy. We as a community felt very comfortable that the use of force policy was going to be implemented in a way that was in line with the community policies. Chief White retired. You and I were both at his retirement party. Chief White retired, Chief Pazin came in to office and literally took that entire use of force policy and threw it out the window during the George Floyd protests and cost the city millions upon millions upon millions of dollars that I'm having to pay and everyone else in this room is having to pay on behalf of the city, not the police department. We citizens are paying it. So we need to have if we're going to make changes to the policy, it needs to be changes that are centered, that are structured and guided by community voice, and that also are not dependent on the personality of the chief, but rather is grounded in something that no chief can change and can alter, as we saw Chief Pazin do, that cost our city and that hurt so many of our citizens physically and emotionally.
Thank you, Dr. Davis, and don't leave. I'm going to give you stay right there. I'm going to give the chief the final words. But Julia, would you sit right there for just a second, because I want to kind of level set and tell everyone how this town hall came into being, because it didn't just happen by happenstance. I'd had several conversations in the Free Think Zone with Liz, Dr. Lisa Calderon, and Julia. And we were having conversations about this disciplinary matrix, which led to a lot of questions. And I said, well, we will reach out to the chief and let him answer those questions and have a dialogue with community. So that was the primary focus of how this even came about. And so with that being said, I'm encouraged to hear individuals who sound like they hadn't been in the room communicating with one another, all in the room communicating with one another. And then there were other questions that were posed by those who put in the RSVP. They asked their questions in the RSVP process, and everybody else was able to chime in from where they came as a participant. So Julia, because you were central to making this conversation happen, along with Dr. Lisa Calderon and Liz with the Office of the Independent Monitor, what would you like to add to or ask as we close this out, and then we'll give the chief the final words?
Thank you. Julia Richmond, Chair of the Citizen Oversight Board. And I would say that why this came about is that many community organizations came to us with their concerns. I think people were surprised at the first presentation of this information in December and didn't know this was coming. We ourselves did not know it was coming. And we've heard for the past 6 months from organizations who have said, we don't like this, we don't agree with it, we haven't been a part of it, and we want the process to be different. I would say that the board itself is against this on its face. We are happy that the chief is listening to our concerns and making modifications to the policy, but we don't agree with the policy in the first place. And so there's no amount of sort of winding down the river of updates that will make us feel that this is not going to erase the oversight that the city has in place. So I think we are well aligned in the need to make the process more efficient, more engaged, and more transparent for the officers that are involved who may be confused on the outcomes that they receive, but more importantly for the community to ensure that public servants who have a high degree of power also have a high degree of accountability to the community that they're serving in. The consequence of bad conduct at the hands of a police officer is severe, and the discipline process needs to take that significantly into account. So appreciate the forum today, really welcome additional community feedback. If folks don't know about the Citizen Oversight Board, there are many board members here who would love to talk with you about that. We also have 2 openings right now on the board, and so we'd love to get members who are here today to join us.
Wow. I want to thank everybody for being here. I think that a lot was covered. I'm really encouraged that it sounds like those of you are going to sit down and at least have a conversation collectively, or an expanded conversation which may or may not have taken place. And Chief Chief Thomas, Chief Thomas. But remember, we have a long history of all being through all of these battles, because the current chief was also there at those task force meetings when we were doing the Paul Childs dynamic. So it's not like any of us are unfamiliar and haven't been in this journey with the multiple iterations and the independent monitor coming about. And I'm just encouraged that everybody's doing this work. Everybody is in, this same room. And Chief Thomas, I want to say thank you for coming and spending not only this time, we most definitely should, if you want to do a town hall with the sheriff of Denver, there he is right there. So, and for everybody who was pointing at somebody else, they are more than happy to sit and have conversations about whatever you would like to have. But Chief Thomas, I want to just thank you for this time, this town hall, and I want to give you the final words.
Thank you. First of all, let me just say that we're probably even now. You called me Chief White, and I suppose that makes up for the fact that I said Happy Juneteenth to the crowd at the Black Arts Festival. So I think we're even.
Those are A and B infractions, by the way.
Exactly. So I don't know. I'll have to see what class we got to take. But anyway, I think that the thing that I want to really get across to folks is that this does not erase oversight. There's still going to be oversight of the entire process. This doesn't remove the OIM from anything. It doesn't take away their power to make recommendations or continue that oversight. And so I think that this is not the monumental shift that I think it's been advertised as.
All right. I listen, Mighty Teamster. I know you wanted to ask the chief something. I know you're sitting there. Before we go, I want to make sure you get an opportunity to say whatever, because I don't want anybody to walk out and say they didn't have the chance. Ronnie, Mr. Houston, the Mighty Teamster, welcome. Although we are in adjournment, we are not in adjournment. What would you like to close this out with?
First of all, Chief Thomas, thanks for coming. Your voice is very powerful in this community. So is the sheriff.
Arthur, sit right next to him, Mighty Teamster Jr.
We appreciate you coming out.
They buy me chicken later, so.
I know.
I like what I saw. Community involvement is what's going to change this. There's been some feelings hurt on both sides. But what I see, I do see hope. I do see hope, and that encourages me. As a 51-year Teamster retired, I came out of retirement to get the city and the county workers of Denver organized. The ballot measure 2U was won, 68-32, and we thought we had a clear sailing to getting these employees organized. We have met resistance. The police, they called the police on us. All we trying to do is do what the citizens voted for. They voted for collective bargaining for these mistreated workers. And we're just trying to organize them. That's all. And I know that the sheriff, I had lunch with him, great lunch. He and I opened our hearts to each other. He was crying, I was crying. I was doing most of the crying. And the Teamsters don't cry.
Teamsters don't cry?
Well, it ain't what we do. We don't fight, we fight.
What about them brothers from Mount Bello?
Well,
them sheriffs from Mount Bello.
Go
ahead.
All I want the chief to know is we need to have access to the workers where we can organize them, because the citizens of Denver County voted for it. It's a mandate coming from the citizens. The last thing us citizens want is our vote to be ignored. It was resoundingly said, give these workers collective bargaining.
Ronnie, are you asking the police chief, or what is your point that you would like access to?
To the airport. At the airport, we've been thrown off. We just out there trying to talk to the worker. They call the police on us, supervisors calling police.
Okay.
Police comes out. They got a job to do, I get it.
And then Arthur, what is your thought? Do you have anything you'd have to ask or share with the chief?
Yeah, Ron Thomas, thanks for coming. Thanks for having me. I basically piggybacking on what Ronnie Houston's saying is that, we need an opportunity to do what the residents of Denver voted for us to do.
Right.
We don't have a space where we're, lined out for us to be, where they said, well, they're going to be there if the workers want to come and talk to us there. We can, we have that space available, because they said that they're doing a lot of construction. We don't have anything for you, and we just need a place for those workers to be able to come to us and talk to us on whenever they have time. And because we don't have that, then we're running around looking for them and going to their houses, and just it making it very difficult for us to talk to them. And we just like any help from the sheriff, the police department, anybody we can get to create us a space that we can operate in where the people can come to us rather than us chasing them all over the city.
Yeah.
Final piece.
Yeah, no, I understand that, and you know, thankfully I know Phil Washington well, and I can have a conversation with him about that.
All right, thank you,
sir.
All right, you all.
Thank
A
you,
round of
Brother
applause.
Jeff.
Thank you for being at this town hall. We appreciate it. There'll be many more. And if you go down swinging, you just might score a knockout. Rumble, young man, woman, and community. Rumble.